the session, but as per last time, we can't hear you or see you at this stage, but you could put your hand up, raise your hand if you wanted to have a chat about a specific thing. But please use that chat, ask your questions, put them in there to all panelists or all panelists and attendees if you want to have everybody involved in the conversation, make a point. So good, thanks for that. It was good to see a little bit of info floating around about sort of Physics 101, which was excellent about the crash forces. So thanks for your interest in following up on that. It was good stuff. I enjoyed it. Sorry, not sure why YouTube doesn't work in New Zealand, but must be our dodgy YouTube over here in Australia. But that one's pretty widely available on different things if you wanted to Google it and find it yourself, or we might find another platform. But no, it was in the memory stick, was it? Anyway, it wasn't. You're on mute.
Sorry, no, not that one.
Yeah.
Next time we'll pop it in there. Good idea.
That's all right. We'll work it out. But anyway, all good. So today's, I'll pop some slides up because I've got this in some slides already. But after the end of this session, you're actually going to have to do a little bit of homework. Don't worry, for the group we've got here, it's not going to take you very long at all because you've got a great background in all of this, and it'll just be an exercise in helping to solidify the categorization of risk under those exposure, likelihood, and severity, which is sort of fundamental to the safe system assessment framework. But this session, we are going to not going to connect movement and place thinking. Sorry, that is module 3. I've skipped you a module, which you are an advanced group, but I think we better get it all the way back. And I think you're already starting to see some wallies. So remember to look for your wallies. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. We're going to focus in on kinetic energy thresholds for different crash types at intersections. And we started talking about this a bit with those curves that you have seen many, many times, no doubt. But we'll delve into a little bit more detail about some of the different crash types, the involvement of different vehicles and the like, and how we might think about what sort of severity outcomes we'll be getting. We will look at characteristics of intersections that align highly with safe system principles, and we will identify characteristics of mid-block locations that align highly with safe system principles, and I suppose by default some of the things that don't align highly with safe system principles. And I sort of highlight a bit of my language there, which I always talk about aligning highly with safe system principles or not aligning well with safe system principles. I don't say this is safe system or this is not safe system, because it is a spectrum. I mean, in theory, there is some like hypothetical thing that would be full safe system. But I don't think we really have that at this stage because it's a complex system. And so that was actually one of the really fundamentally flawed things, I think, in the introduction of the safe system across Australia and New Zealand, is that we got everybody excited and riled up about this, this idea of the safe system. And then we had all the directors, executive directors, CEOs, ministers saying, you know, is that project safe system? And it's a kind of meaningless question, really. I mean, the question of does that align well with safe system principles is a much more logical question, a bit more of a mouthful, but that's much more logical than is it safe system? Now, I mean, I sort of took the mickey out of that whole situation and set up a company called Safe System Solutions because everybody had this desire for that, you know, is it safe system or not? And I thought I'd just leverage off that. But you will hear me always talk about things aligning highly with safe system principles or not so aligned with safe system principles. And the beauty of a safe system assessment and the fact that it scores things really brings that home to bear, doesn't it? I mean, you can have something with a score of 50 or something with a score of 200, and the lower the score, the better the alignment with safe system principles. So it really reinforces that there is a spectrum here, and we're trying to push ourselves as close to that pure ultimate goal of 0 in the safe system assessment framework. But nothing we really have at the moment gives us that absolute 0 score in a practical sense. I mean, completely blocking off a road and making it a pedestrian mall or something like that might give you that under some certain scenarios, but the majority, overwhelming in a practical sense, is that we're running a road network for moving vehicles and goods and people around. But anyway, we'll delve into that more. Remember to count your wallies. It'll be a quiz question, and I hope you all managed to get to the quiz and you didn't find it too hard. I haven't actually checked the results, but I'm sure you all did fairly well. Now, I talked briefly about finding out who was road safety auditors with this group, and I wanted to pop up this diagram, which I think is it will help clarify in your mind where safe system assessments sit. So road safety audit's been around a long time. It's a good process. It really looks at, does that independent assessment of the proposal or the road. It looks for road safety deficiencies. And it's one of the tools we have to inject road safety into designs, into projects in an independent assessment sense. I mean, just good practice in design is wonderful, and having good, skilled, knowledgeable designers who understand some of these principles is great. And there are design review processes, and some of the audit overlaps with design review. I mean, we know that road safety audits are not a design check against standards and the like, but sometimes they overlap, and things that don't meet standards are picked up in audit reports because they are road safety issues, and that's all part of good road safety auditing. The design review does a lot of that and looks at a whole lot of standards and other aspects of the design that may not be directly related with road safety, and that's all important stuff. Safe system assessments sort of overlap the road safety audit process in a significant way. There's a decent amount of overlap there. The design review process, there's a little bit of overlap, and some of the safe system assessment stuff might be associated with standards and guidelines and conformance with those sort of things, as long as it's real road safety outcomes we're looking at, and with that safe system alignment as well. So, but there's not a huge amount of that in there. And then there's a number of things outside that said, safe system assessments are covering that are road safety audit and a design review won't particularly cover, either in a content sense or in a sort of process and way that the assessment can be used sense. So the scoring, for example, that's not part of an audit. I mean, we do risk rate in audits, but you don't get that sort of quantitative score. There's some looking into other elements of the system and that interaction. So that's different. The categorization of treatments into primary or supporting treatments in terms of how well they align with safe system principles in terms of the treatments. So there's a fair bit more packed into these safe system assessments. And I'll take you through that a little bit more as we get into the process. There's safety in design, and I think it's still called safety in design in New Zealand, but it's that look at an independent sort of check and workshop and reporting on the ability to safely build whatever is planned, the ability to safely maintain it, manage it, and decommission it. So there's a little bit of that in safe system assessments and occasionally in audits and certainly design reviews as well, but there's again stuff covered in that is different. Then there's also what I would call a DDA audit, which is a Disability Discrimination Act in a number of jurisdictions in Australia, and I'm not sure the term for it in New Zealand, whether it's the same or it's got another one, but that's checking that people with differing abilities can access the facility and the ramp grades, the tactiles, and those sorts those sorts of features for, you know, people in wheelchairs or blind people, vision impaired people. So you can see then again that there's a bit of overlap in some road safety auditing in that, and design reviews, hardly any with safe system assessments in that sense, or maybe a little bit. But I think that that sort of diagram tries to contextualize things. You know, it's very sort of theoretical. I mean, you could move things around a bit here and there and pop things into other segments and the like. But I think that's just to give you a general idea. I think we've got Antonio with a hand raised maybe on this diagram. So Kathy, perhaps we could unmute Antonio there and say.
Yes, thank you. One consideration regarding design. So maybe a benefit to make the first step as a safety in design. So it may impact more significantly on the following steps. That's what we are doing here, but I think it's international. Thank you.
So sorry, Antonio, just to clarify there, you're saying that safety and design should be the first of these processes to be undertaken?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So
Thanks.
yeah, thank you. And I suppose the order which I put them up wasn't necessarily the order in which I think they should be undertaken. But now that you raised that, it's a very good point, and I should have a good think about the ordering of those. Certainly within the whole life cycle of a project, where the safety assessments are being injected is very important. And that's actually covered in module 6 in talking about where you would get the best value from safe system assessments as compared to road safety audits within the life cycle of a project or a road, or within the design and construction process. I haven't talked about it specifically with safety and design, but I can see some of your comments there, and I agree with those, but I'm going to have a little bit of a ponder about that. But thank you for sharing that. It's a good, really good point. And
sorry, another point that Kevin's made, that DDA should potentially be more incorporated into safe system assessments as disabled and more vulnerable than other road users and more likely to be outside vehicles.
Yes, okay. I take that point on, absolutely. What I find in practice, this is a very, I suppose, challenging topic where a lot of DDA compliance style things are really not going to move us to elimination of death and serious injury. They are important access and fairness and equality things that must be injected into our project. But the correlation to death and serious injury is very, very remote. And we see this play out with a lot of, you know, if you just delve into the historical death and serious injury amongst pedestrians, and you see that certainly the, you know, with people with different abilities are overrepresented as a percentage-wise in terms of their exposure in that, you know, vehicle kilometres travelled style sense. However, the numbers are so staggeringly small that, you know, our big major trauma to our community is occurring through other scenarios. By no means am I saying that it's not important. I'm just saying that if your safe system assessment is putting a huge emphasis and focus on that, we may not be getting the biggest benefit in fatal and serious injury. And that's why I, to a degree, like the fact that there's this separate independent process that analyzes that and gives it its own merit, which it absolutely has, and shines a light on those aspects. Yeah, but point taken, they are certainly more vulnerable and they are exposed to some significant forces because the pedestrians are sometimes in mobility scooters and the like. Good point, thank you. This is good. We're getting some conversation happening, so please keep that coming. And you saw a great example there from Antonio to put your hand up and talk it through, or as Kevin did there, to type it in. So please keep those questions and comments coming. So we're going to jump into intersections straight off the bat. And shortly, I'll be doing a little exercise with you, which I think, yeah, it's a bit of a fun exercise, but it's also gives us a bit of practice in the categorization of exposure, likelihood, and severity. Now, I took this from a Monash University Accident Research Centre report. It's a little bit of an old report, but it's a you know, the principles are pretty obvious and pretty sound, and I don't need to spend long on it. But in terms of intersection design to get the highest alignment with safe system principles, we would ideally have fewer vehicles or fewer intersections. Those are challenging things to do. Fewer intersections, possibly a little bit better. Fewer vehicles at this big sort of macro sense can be something that could theoretically be injected into a safe system assessment if it was a you know, a holistic area or something like that, to look at alternative forms of transport, safer forms of transport, or the like, or reducing vehicle use somehow. And but you know, it's a little bit hard in a practical sense in an individual project to be working on those sorts of things. Fewer intersection and consolidation of intersections is an absolutely you know, something that we can look at. You still have the exposure then being pushed into the other intersection if you've got the same number of vehicles, but if you can provide the better facilities at those intersections, that's good. Then you're into sort of the intersection configuration itself, and you've got conflict points per intersection, so trying to address that. And under a safe system assessment, the number of conflict points we actually categorize in the likelihood of crashes category. So I think a lot of you will probably come from a background where that would be a crash exposure factor. And you'll see that in a safe system assessment, in that extraction of exposure and likelihood, there was a lot of debate about where you would categorize conflict points. And it ended up that conflict points were categorized in the likelihood of the crash at the intersection, the number of conflict points. And the exposure was the number of vehicles then, you know, being exposed. So it's basically a volume of vehicles going through that intersection, or volume of pedestrians, or volume of cyclists, or motorcyclists for that matter. And then once you've sort of worked those conflict points through, the impact speeds and angles. Now, we're really talking about passenger vehicle crashes here at intersections as this immediate focus, but then you'll see a little bit down further, we have a bit on pedestrians and cyclists. But this is where we then take things back to our biomechanical tolerances of the human body, how much force we can handle in different crash scenarios with the you know, average fleet that we've got in New Zealand, and or the area that you're looking at, and what you can expect survivability rates to be. So generally that T-bone crash, as we saw in the graph, we're looking at 50 kilometers per hour or less as our sort of aspiration. If you can get more angle on that, and you can have a bit of sort of vectors 101 and push some of the energy out into the environment, you can get that that speed up a little bit more, maybe up around the 60 kilometer per hour mark, and we're still seeing good, or I suppose good alignment in terms of the severity of crashes there. So they're in the lower end. Now, you know, you can't say that, you know, as soon as you you know, you've got an angle of you know, 45 or whatever, and it's at 60 kilometers per hour, there won't be any death or serious injury. No, that there will be less, and we know it exponentially drops down in these sorts of waves. With the cyclists and pedestrians, unprotected road users and motorcyclists, we're talking about that 30 kilometre per hour. And we know that for pedestrians and cyclists, the angle isn't such an influence in terms of the angle that the car hits those road users. Motorcyclists a little bit more, and there's some interesting research on biomechanical tolerances of motorcyclists out of Sweden as well. Yeah, I'll have to dig that paper up if anybody has a specific interest in that, but it's good stuff there. And then the idea that if you can't get sort of within these things, you need to be looking at ways to try to eliminate that, maybe eliminate the exposure or reconfigure things so that the speeds and angles somehow align well. Now, I'm going to take you through this in a number of different examples to sort of solidify this, but at a very high simplistic level, these are some decent principles that you can think about. I've got this little table here which sort of just reinforces that with vehicle-to-vehicle collisions, and you can see there that we've sort of got these different angles at that 60 km/h mark. Head-ons, rear ends are an interesting beast in their own right. You can you get that forward momentum going, and there's a little bit more tolerance, but at the moment it's really seen within that 70 km/h at a vehicle stop and then the vehicle colliding at that 70 km/h into the vehicle. But we're not getting that force versus force, so it's obviously a little bit different. But these are fairly broad brush, and a number had to be picked. I showed you that graph on Monday, which sort of had a shading and things sort of shading through, which is a more appropriate way to present these sorts of things, I think. At 80 km/h, really, we can't find a feasible way to operate an intersection if you're getting that change in vehicle speed or the speed differential at 80 km/h. Certainly, if you can accelerate vehicles up to speed and they're crashing at 80 km/h, one's 80, one's 70 or something like that, we know that crash impact is definitely survivable. The secondary impacts would need to be considered and where those vehicles might go, but certainly at that perspective, we can survive those sort of things. Now, there are, I suppose, models available that are much more intricate in these sorts of things, and you can see here this is from ChemX or XChemX, which is the kinetic energy management model. Now, in a safe system assessment, you would never need to go to that level of precision. Those tools are good on a very, trying to get an in-depth analysis, but these sorts of figures, the graphs, and some other figures I've got coming up shortly are pretty much enough with your professional judgment to be giving scores for severity of crashes you predict under a safe system assessment. You don't need to really be precise with working out the angle of crashes that could happen, but you can sort of imagine these crashes. And remember that there's tolerance within each of these. So we talk about a 90-degree crash and 50 km/h. Well, if it's slightly altered around that, you'd still call it a 90-degree crash, and thinking about a 50 km/h being that point where you're exponentially kicking up in terms of severity outcomes. Now, Antonio has got his hand raised again, so I'll see if Cap.
Yeah,
yep.
Sorry for taking your time. Just a quick question regarding the angles, so the degree. Can you suggest to collaborate and cooperate with road engineers for the assessment of, or to get this data and this information?
So the designers, the design
Yeah.
engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can if you want, but I do want to reinforce that a safe system assessment is a fairly broad brush tool, and getting this sort of stuff is probably far more precise than you actually need in a safe system assessment. So I don't think there's anything that you would need to do that would require you to be in MicroStation or AutoCAD and working out exactly these things. You can do it by eye and just go, oh, okay, that's about a 90-degree, so we'll think about that in that way. Oh, that one's got a better angle on it, so we'll sort of categorize it in a different way. So I will stress this throughout the next modules, but safe system assessments are a broad brush tool. Yes, they give out a precise score, and I'll talk to you about why that is and the advantages of that. But don't get caught up into thinking it's a very precise sort of science in that sense.
Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio, and don't apologise at all for asking questions. That's fantastic. It makes me quite happy that people are interacting and clarifying things.
And sorry, just a quick one about intersections. We've got a sort of question here about smaller size smaller size intersections have less of a crash rate than wider and bigger sized intersections with the same number of lanes, etc. So I guess, what's your take on smaller intersections versus larger intersections and their crash rates?
I agree with that. That's good. Whoever's pointed that out. And in terms of the way we would look at that in a safe system assessment, people will, when they start doing safe system assessments, be drawn into trying to categorize the size of the intersection as an exposure mechanism. Now, and that's because for a very long time we've all been putting that as an exposure. You're exposed for a longer time into the crash. And it's a bit grey in the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework, and the Victorian and South Australian guidelines that drilled deeper in have clarified it a bit more. And we've produced some fact sheets which we've given out to industry, which we'll give to all of you, that even clarify that further. But what we would say is that the exposure is still the number of vehicles going through. And where you get the benefit from the smaller intersection is the likelihood of crashes. And that's how it plays out. So yeah, so whoever's put that in is spot on in terms of the outcome, and where we categorise that in a safe system assessment is likelihood. I just do mention secondary crashes at intersections. So the first crash may not be as direct as this sort of crash. You may get glancing blows, you may get people avoiding crashes and clipping and those sorts of things. And so the run-off road rate at around intersections actually goes up. And often it gets categorised, I suppose, as an intersection crash of some description, and then they've hit a signal pole, or they've hit a tree in the area, or a power pole, and there's lots of fixed hazards around a lot of intersections. So it's something that we need to think about, not just that first crash, but any secondary crashes as well. And this was some work out of University of Adelaide, just sort of clarifying that with some pretty obvious stuff. But you've got vehicle here, vehicle here, and they crash at the intersection. And the secondary crashes are occurring in these areas predominantly, but some other areas as well with different strikes. So some obvious stuff, and some of you would have seen these before and be fully aware of it. Now, how does that play out in a safe system assessment? Well, when you're doing an intersection assessment, you are asked about run-off road, head-on, sideswipe, other crash types, and while they are within the intersection envelope as such, in the sort of land use perspective, they are categorised as what the end crash type is. So, run-off road hit pole, well, it may have started with an intersection type crash, but the end result that transpired, the death and serious injury, is that pole crash. Okay, so let's do a little exercise. And I know actually that at least one of you in there, Etienne, has done this one with me before in Grafton, but there's a slight tweak on it this time. So, but the others, I don't think have done this exercise with me, but I've got a bit more to do with it. The intersection is here, and it is a major arterial road carrying 19,000 vehicles a day. So can I write that up there? 19,000. is the AADT. And this side road's only got 1200. The route is a bus route. You can see there's a bus stop there. And this is a sort of shared path facility. There's a school down here, about 400 metres. This is a drain culvert thing, so the water goes through there, and that's a bit of an area for the water to run off there. It's residential, as you can see. This is a service road. It's a two-way service road. It's just access to these properties. There's some other openings up and down there. It's a B double route, so that's a large vehicle route. I get confused at what different jurisdictions call their trucks, but it's big vehicle, a massive truck. And yeah, they're the main things that I want to tell you about it, just to get your head around it. But what your task is going to be is to come up with alterations to this intersection to get us as high alignment with safe system principles as possible. So they could be any changes that you want. And I will put a few little constraints on you though, in terms of the freedom that you have. The first constraint is that access must be maintained in all directions in and out of this in a fairly easy manner, if that makes sense. So we need people to be able to do that, and they can't go many kilometres up the road or the like, and so you can't close off that road, which I know a lot of you, being sort of good safe system thinkers, thought, can we eliminate this conflict and push it to a much safer location? So that's one limitation. Your second limitation is you've got $2.5 million, 2.5 million. 2.5 million NZ dollars. Actually, should check how much infrastructure costs in New Zealand before I make these calls. 2.5 million. I think you'll be all right to get some really good safety benefits, better alignment with safe system principles using your 2.5 million. And the third constraint I put on you is that you are operating in the current political, community, organisational environment in which you are currently in. So if you are proposing something quite radical, I want a bit of a plan on how you might navigate that through the challenging system that you have. So those are all the real constraints I'm putting on you. And the only final thing that I say is that if you are proposing any infrastructure, I want you to categorize that infrastructure for me into impacting on exposure, likelihood, or severity, or a combination. So if you were allowed to close off this intersection, which I've just told you you are not allowed to do, if you were to close off this intersection, there we go, we've joined up that, got rid of the right turn lane, and yeah, we won't worry too much about the, actually, just to make things really clear, let's close off the service roads as well and make that some sort of court bowl, and they're going to turn around. Okay, if you've done that, well, you have changed the exposure to crashes because no vehicle can access that intersection. So if I was doing this and we were allowed to do that, I would type into the chat, close intersection, close median, create court ball, and influences exposure to crashes. And I would say, great job, you've shown you can clarify these things. You cannot do that. That is not on the cards. I've just told you access must remain open. We've done the community consultation, and that is a mandatory. But I want you to get as good alignment with safe system principles as you can. And we're going to give you a good 5 minutes just to have a ponder about this. I will take any questions from the group in terms of what the infrastructure is, services, whatever you want to know. I will also be a cost estimator. So you just write in what you're thinking and say cost, please, and I will give you a dollar figure that it will cost to build or change or implement whatever you're thinking. But you are welcome to make that call yourself.
Could you remind us of what's the speed environment we're talking about here, Ken?
Excellent question. So this is currently 70 kilometers per hour. And here's a picture of it from ground level. So the arterial road operates at 70 kilometers per hour, and the 85th percentile speed is pretty much on that 70, a little bit above. So it's pushing a little bit. The side road here is a 50 kilometer per hour default. So there you can see the bus stop, you can see the turn lane. I'll jump over to the other end and give you a look at it. So there you go, there's the drainage facility, there's the shared path coming in. You can see 2 lanes in each direction, the side road's got some lighting.
And another question, what is the percentage? I think it's, how's my deciphering here? Is it heavy vehicles, percentage of heavy vehicles?
I bet, yeah.
Is that right, James? Just tell me if I got that right.
Percentage HV, yeah, or CV. Yes, so the percentage is 9%. 9% commercial vehicles, heavy vehicles.
Great. Any other questions? No, it's not Northern Territory. Yeah. Okay, good.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll give you a few minutes, jot it down, have a think broadly, think creatively, give us some ideas on how you might navigate it through the NZTA system or the New Zealand system to make sure that we can implement some of this stuff and categorize them. Categorizing them is really what I want to get out of this exercise, that if you say, I don't know, remove the tree, I want to know whether that influences exposure, likelihood, or severity.
What's the percentage?
B doubles turning.
I think so. B double
turning out of the side road.
Yeah.
No, zero. None of the largest vehicle actually turn into that side road. It's a residential area with a school and things like that. They're not going down there. Some of the larger semi-trailers turn in there occasionally. You could probably use that as a checking vehicle. Your design vehicle, though, would essentially just need to be a service vehicle, rubbish truck, a school bus, I suppose. The school bus sometimes goes down there, so that's probably your largest vehicle. But certainly, for those who are thinking about a roundabout, I no doubt who are starting to think about that, the size of that to get those vehicles around with the circulating ambulance is quite large. And I dare say if you want to get a full-size roundabout there, you blew your 2.5 million plus more, and you had to ask for a large variation, which we denied.
Thanks, Ken. We've got our first request for quote. 2 people requesting the same thing. Ben and Heather, how much is a signalised raised platform?
Oh, wow, okay. So to raise the whole intersection and signalise it, $2.38 million. To do some raised platforms on the approach and signalise it is 2.17 million. You like my precise cost estimation?
How much to provide a separated cycleway?
Separated cycleway is going to actually be, well, it depends exactly how you want it to design it. If you wanted to utilise the service road facilities in there and to connect it up and down and through, 400,000 gets you quite a nice facility in that sense. You know, be interested in how you're going to cross the road in that sense, or utilising the other side. We've got some services running under the ground here and alongside, so some big challenges if you want to go over there and provide big wide facilities.
Can we reduce the speed?
You tell me. Would your current community political system be okay with that? Obviously, you don't have enough detail and you haven't been there and you don't know things about it to do a sort of speed zone review of it and the like. But you know, if you think that's the sort of thing that's on the cards, how much are you going to reduce it by? Well, that's again up to you and what you think would be you know, acceptable in a practical sense.
How much to improve the right turn movement out of the side road into the median, i.e. extend the median and reduce speed on the main road to say 50 kilometres an hour?
Okay, that can all happen for 750,000. That's certainly possible with some tweaks and configurations like that.
How much would it cost to just signalise the intersection?
1.8 million. It's set up decently for signalisation. I dare say somebody in the past thought about maybe signalising it at some point in the future, but you know, that's there's a bit of work to be done, but it's within your budget.
Ranjan's given us a quote that roundabout would be nearly 5 million. How much to protect the side road hazards along both sides of the main road?
Yep. Okay, the main road in the sort of vicinity in the intersection, a little bit on the approach either side would be 75,000. Not a huge amount. We've got some spots where we can put it there. A bit of precision barrier design, and you're in a pretty good position there.
And how much to protect the culvert?
Okay, the culvert just itself, 40,000, both sides of it. A little bit of playing around with how exactly you do that. You need a ground beam over the culvert with some barrier posts connected to that, but it's all very possible.
Can we have any crash history on this site?
Right, interesting. Well, yes, you can. The main crash type, so there have been there's been 4 serious injury crashes in the last 5 years, a handful of other injury crashes, and no fatalities. But the serious injuries have been a right turn against. It's not doing what it should. Right turn against. So turning in, being struck by vehicles coming through here. Was 2 of them, and 2 of them were right through. So where the white car is coming out and being struck that way. Some of the minor ones have been the entry in here and some rear ends. And the keep clear is there because there's a signalised intersection further up the road and the vehicles bank back quite a long way. So it'll be a good 800 metres up but they still bank all the way back down there and continue through. All right, we're going to have to keep moving it on. So just make your calls now. And remember, I don't just want to know what you're doing. I want to know what it influences in terms of exposure, likelihood, or severity. So let's see a few. So type them in when you're ready.
We had some earlier responses.
Okay, let's just give it another 20.
Okay. All right.
People just type a few things in.
Mm-hmm. Yep, type it into the chat.
This is good. I'm seeing some things come in already. Good. This is very good.
I think Mark in the group has also seen this one before.
Right. Yes. Yes. I do use it a little bit. It's one of my favourite, but quite a few people have started to see this, and I've given it to a few others to use. So I probably need to
get some new material, Ken.
Get some new material. That's right. But it works quite nicely in terms of this categorisation of exposure, likelihood, and severity. So I do like to use it. All right, seeing beautiful stuff come in.
Someone's even costed theirs.
Yes, and they have a lot of extra money left over, so maybe they'll have a great Christmas party or something with that extra money. All right, this is good. And make sure you do write that, exposure, likelihood, and severity, which I'm seeing in most of them, which is good. And gee, I like the fact that this group knows how much their things are going to cost. I think they're very much in the space of doing exactly this kind of thing. Okay, I'm just going to briefly read through a few of these and then use the discussion that you've made as I continue a few slides. And there is no right or wrong answer with this. And what I want to see is that likelihood and exposure and severity categorization clear in your mind. So we're seeing there's quite a few people looking at how they could reduce speed on the approach to the intersection. And quite a few people are looking at different forms of raised platform, which I think shows some of the advancements in New Zealand compared to a lot of other jurisdictions or jurisdictions in Australia who are not thinking along those lines for these sorts of intersections. Roundabouts, certainly people are attracted to, which is good. And I want to see a lot of people there have said that roundabout reduces the severity, and that's spot on. Roundabouts, we know, often have about the same number of crashes. The severity is down. So we really categorize that roundabout into severity. But rightly pointed out by a number of you, it's just going to cost an absolute bomb. And we, probably couldn't afford a full-size roundabout. I see there's some interesting stuff around the pedestrian facilities and providing facilities for the pedestrian, which influences the likelihood. So sort of pedestrian crossing, either signals or crossing facilities. Now, that wouldn't influence the exposure because there is still the exposure to crashes. The exposure under a safe system assessment, at least, is really dictated by the number of pedestrians that are needing to cross that road. And that won't change. It's just you provide these facilities, which makes it less likely that a crash will result. Seeing there a seagull intersection being floated as a potential idea. And You know, that one is always, I find, quite fascinating, and I'm sure you all know what a seagull intersection is, but it would sort of provide some sort of acceleration facility. Sorry, I'm just going to go here. You know, some sort of acceleration. Well, that's really bad. Acceleration facility there in the seagull. So vehicles could, you know, enter something, accelerate down. Now, seagulls are problematic. I mean, merge from the right has always been problematic in any scenario. And, you know, the angle of crash theoretically would be better. So the severity should be less at that crash. The severity here will be exactly the same, won't it? Because that's still going to be that crash or the vehicle turning in, getting struck. And we know that's a problematic thing in this intersection. But at one point, in theory, a seagull helps you out down here. But the merge from the right is a pretty challenging thing. Now, seagulls are quite a complicated intersection in terms of working out whether they're going to improve road safety or not. But luckily, the New Zealanders, you lot, have actually produced a tool that helps you through that process. So if you're not familiar with the seagull intersection risk assessment tool, which you have available, I suggest you have a look at that. It's in one of your research reports. I enjoy it. It makes me quite happy that somebody's done that analysis. I think it was Shane Turner who did that analysis while I was at Stantec, and it's good stuff. But in the sense of, would a seagull reduce your likelihood, severity, or exposure? A seagull by itself, I would say, would maybe give you a slight reduction in severity, but actually probably an increase in likelihood of crashes. So if you signalise the seagull, again, you could bring the likelihood down, the severity a tiny touch down because of the severity reduction in here, but you're still sitting up quite high in severity for most of this. You might think about combining it with other things. So what else did we see here? So some people who wanted to drop the speed limit, which is, you know, has some good merit to it in reducing both the likelihood and severity of crashes under the Safe System Assessment Framework. However, I would be interested with some people who are dropping it significantly from 70 kilometres an hour down to 50 or the like. How are you going to convince the community and the like that, you know, this is acceptable? Now, I've seen somebody's popped in a RIOS, called all sorts of things around, so that's the Rural Intersection Activated Warning Sign, or Side Road Activated Speed, SRAS it's called in some jurisdictions, and the like. I think, you know, and rightly pointed out there that there must be some challenges in community acceptance of that. I think it'd be more acceptable to a degree, but some challenges. But that would also influence the likelihood and severity of crashes. Okay, I think I've covered off quite a few of those. I think it's a really good discussion we've had there. The exposure still remains for pedestrians, I'm reading here, unless segregating walking cyclists by means of underpass or overbridge. That is correct. And even with those, you need to have assurance that everybody's going to use it. So that if some pedestrians are still crossing at grade, you have to factor those in as still your exposure score. So, but theoretically, yes, that's the only way we can sort of alter that exposure for pedestrians and cyclists. And a little bit more discussion on seagulls, which is interesting. Yeah, I've just received his quote of 2,499,999. Very good. Enjoyable. Right, okay. Let me take some of that and go forward. And I'll talk to you about this intersection and how it played out and why it played out. And we'll continue to do those categorizations. Kathy, please jump in if if anything else pops up that I need to be aware of. Now, a number of you wanted signalisation there, and you're quite interested in that. And you know, there's a number of reasons I'm sure you're interested in that. The cost, the lower cost of the signals, the unbalanced flow from the side road and the main road having the majority of the traffic, and the fact that we know that signals do reduce the number of deaths and serious injuries. And they do that though through the likelihood. And you'll see down here that I've got my little exposure likelihood severity ticks that are going to appear throughout any infrastructure facilities that we're talking about. And it's just because I need to hammer home which these categorize in and where you would be categorizing them in a safe system assessment. So we get our benefit out of signals from likelihood. We know it's somewhere in the order of 45% reduction, which is driven through stopping the crashes happening. But when they happen, they're still just as severe. Now, a lot of people are tempted to try to say that this is an exposure change. Under a safe system assessment, it is not. We know people run red lights, we know crashes still occur, and there's still the exposure to it, even though a lot of them do stop. You know, the majority of them do stop. But I just did do a little bit of heat mapping of an outer metropolitan area. So, you know, your big traffic sewer roads, your big arterial roads that are pumping the traffic through. And the hotspots are death and serious injury over I think a 10-year period. But it's just fascinating to see, isn't it, that where do we see them all? Large signalised intersections. They're all large signalised intersections. So while we've got this facility that we know improves road safety, it certainly is the source of a lot of death and serious injury across you know, all jurisdictions really. And there has been in the past a thought that this is your ultimate intersection treatment before you grade separate it by some of the sort of traffic engineering community. You know, once you've got it to signalisation, and then you'll eventually grade separate it. And Jeremy Woolley, who's from Centre for Automotive Safety Research, Professor Jeremy Woolley, made this very provocative statement. He said, traffic signals are the biggest failure of traffic engineers, in the sense that, you know, that there is a huge amount of death and serious injury associated with them. So a little exercise, some of you may have done, but, you know, pull the top 100 intersections for death and serious injury in your jurisdiction or in your area and see how many are large signalised intersections. It's a bit of a wake-up call. For, you know, when we do that in Melbourne, for example, that they're almost all large signalised intersections, but they get ignored because it's too hard to do anything to them. So it's time we start to really address this, and there's some pretty exciting stuff happening, and I think New Zealand's you know, doing really well on that. Roundabouts were mentioned, beautiful. Roundabouts really address that severity, and they do a wonderful, wonderful job of that. We know around the 80%, you know, site-specific nuances, obviously, but 80% plus for a single lane roundabout. But the size and the cost is a challenge, and people were rightly asking about these vehicles and their turning, because to get a very large vehicle around this roundabout, it needs to be quite big for the swept path, catering for that. And we've got some challenges there, but they are, these roundabouts work in a number of ways. I'll come back to exactly why we're getting these huge benefits out of roundabouts. But it's interesting to just sort of say, well, hang on, do we need roundabouts as big as they are? You know, here's a tiny little roundabout, and obviously going to be pretty cheap. Well, maybe they had to do these little splitter islands, might cost you a little bit, but very different road environment to what we were dealing with. But nonetheless, you know, you're not going to have huge problems with larger vehicles because they're just going to drive over it, aren't they? So that'll work. But are we going to get the same benefit? Well, no, we're not going to get as much benefit, but gee, we're going to get a fair bit of benefit. And one of the main reasons why you're going to get so much benefit of something like this is that nobody approaching this intersection believes they have ultimate priority. And that's one of the key things associated with roundabouts. A lot of us in practice have really focused on that conflict point reduction, the angle, and the like, but no sense of ultimate priority is a pretty massive part of roundabouts. And so everybody approaching here, even if they've got a straight run through, which they do, at least we're switching them on to look and they check, and then there's some slowing down. This certainly would be a straight run through, and there'd be some challenges there and a few sort of things. But I do find that's important. These sorts of facilities are this one's in the UK, the UK equivalent of the American four-way stop, really, isn't it? And you can do some features to slow vehicles with some raised platforms on the approach to slow vehicles, and even if you've got smaller, straighter runs through. But these are, wonderful severity reduction, and I think we need to continue to look for lots of ways to get those benefits in larger signalised intersections. Conflict points. So this is really 101 stuff, and I'm sure you're all quite aware of it. Less conflict points at a roundabout than there are at a signalised intersection. The angle of impact is much better there. So back to old vectors there, right angle there, that crash deflects out into the environment, much more friendly at the roundabout scenario. That one's just to remind you that, as people approach a roundabout, they wake up from their, the sleep that they're in or whatever's going on, even if they're a little bit intoxicated or on drugs or the like, where they tend to be more alert approaching a roundabout, which is a pretty big win, and they'll slow down and they'll look around. So there's a huge win. If there's a set of traffic signals, there is an element that will be continuing into their days and half asleep and just go straight through the red light. And that's where we get challenges, and we get people running red lights intentionally as well, and those sorts of things. So it's pretty rare for anybody to run straight into a roundabout. It happens, but it's pretty rare. And obviously roundabouts are performing very well, but not all roundabouts are the same. There's multiple lane roundabouts, which are challenging in terms of people getting higher speeds, straighter lines through there. Some interesting stuff here on radius of the roundabout there, radius, speed through, and speed's pretty good proxy for crash outcomes there. And you see there that the single lane roundabout and double lane roundabout, once they get really big, they're sort of performing fairly similar, and turbo roundabout sitting in there. And a turbo roundabout's a two-lane roundabout with a dividing separator, essentially, which I'll show you, not for particular safe system outcomes, but just out of a bit of interest, that's a raised separator there, and then you've got a raised separator there, and if you want to go right, you get yourself into the middle there, and you go around. And you come out there. There's a turbo roundabout. Gee, I love look at that. Look at the conflict angle on that. It's beautiful. Just wonderful to see that. That would the reason I like turbos for their ability to actually bring the likelihood of crashes, and they perform about the same as one lane roundabouts. And this one to me sort of typifies where we, at least in Australia, are really quite behind in our philosophy of the operation of large intersections. And this is out of the Netherlands, and it's a large roundabout. Obviously, it's large turbo, signalised turbo. It looks chaotic, doesn't it? From here on the ground, I am told, I haven't actually been through it. It's quite obvious, and they feel it's quite fine. But I was talking to a Dutch engineer when they were over visiting and chatting about many different things. But popped this up, and this is fascinating to me, because in Australia here we would. This would be a large signalised intersection, because the volumes would just get to that point and we'd just go rip the roundabout out, large signalised intersection, pump that traffic through. And, you know, it might get to the point where it gets grade separated, but that's, you know, it's definitely going to be a large signalised intersection. And his response was, well, what about all the death and serious injury that would happen? I'm like, yeah, I agree. It's strange. And it's just the philosophy that you would never let something like that out there. Instead, you would keep modifying your roundabout because of those characteristics of slowing people down, improving angles through this obviously high risk you know, conflict area where they've got lots of vehicles crossing. And so of course you must slow them down. I just think we think about sort of that high risk intersection in a very different way, and we need to start altering that. These sorts of you know, concepts are coming up more and more for large signalised intersections. Nobody's quite built them in the Southern Hemisphere, but I'm hoping maybe a wonderfully forward-thinking country like New Zealand might be the first to delve into this, but to take a large signalised intersection and add some roundabout characteristics to it to mean that this vehicle approaching here at 2 in the morning doesn't, you know, go straight through that red light, but they are forced to slow down a bit, to go around with better angles and then continue to move through. So these sorts of things, I think, where we need to innovate and keep thinking about these things. There's a smaller little concept as well. Kathy, any points or questions before I touch on the raised platforms, which a number of people brought up?
Yes, please. So there was lots of comments that came through. Kevin was saying would avoid ITS as it can and does fail, thereby leaving the site vulnerable. It should be a last resort, not a first resort. Ben commented on route consistency with the upstream intersection. Kevin commented on the signals that you showed back at the start. They are less safe than they should be. Use the full red and green ahead arrow.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, no, good points.
Okay. He also commented on a supporter of mini roundabouts, only permitted in the UK as a retrofit and not for new sites, but they do fit into an existing intersection footprint. Lisa commented on your turbo roundabout, but it does not the turbo one. The other very complicated looking one. What was that called? The very complicated looking one. I've renamed it. Uses a lot of land. No, not that one. I think the one before.
Oh, that one. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
that's the one.
Oh my God, yes. The land take on that is just massive, isn't it?
And
I love on this one that this is their bike facility that goes nicely under it.
Oh wow. Okay.
Isn't that beautiful? I put the big stamp over it anyway.
Yeah, and Kevin's shared a local one. So Kevin, did you want to share that one? There's a link there. Handles a massive amount of traffic very safely. I'll share that with everyone. Perhaps.
Is it a roundabout?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that signalising roundabouts is just as an absolute must. And I know New Zealand does signalise roundabouts, and that's, you know, credit to you, and more of that needs to happen, because you need to continue to get those benefits as long as you can. I mean, the next thing we were going to talk about are these raised safety platforms, which I'm glad so many people brought up as a potential viable option there. And there's simply some sort of vertical deflection on the approach or raising the whole intersection. And that is actually what they proposed at this site. And here's a sort of, you know, artistic impression, which is obviously, you know, always technically inaccurate, but don't get too concerned about that. But they've said, let's do some raised platforms on the approach here. And we'll signalise it because it's all set up so nicely for signalisation, as many of you saw, and we can't afford the big roundabout. And why, though, are they only gone here and here? Well, these are the bullet vehicles, aren't they? They're the ones that are going to do the damage. These ones, this one turning in and this one coming out, they're the target vehicle. Their speeds are not going to be at the collision speed to cause death and serious injury. They're the ones that are going to get the injury. So slowing these bullet vehicle speeds down is paramount. And on these sort of T intersections, you can do that quite nicely and not have any impact on the turning traffic in that sense. And it's a bit cheaper to be doing it that way. But I do just love this because the region really felt that signalisation was the right thing to do for a lot of those reasons you were all coming up with. But they weren't going to accept that this would be another one to add to that list of their highest death and serious injury intersections in their region. So what else can we do? And so push to lower the speeds through there and reduce the severity. So the likelihood is being reduced significantly by those signals, but the severity was still there for crashes. And so they really worked on that with, trying to look at these raised platforms. On a bus route, on a heavy vehicle route, yes, they're not going to be happy about it to start with, but once it's built, they'll no doubt be okay. And sure enough, they managed to build it. And you'll see there, we've got advisory speeds at that 50 kilometers per hour. There it is again there. Advisory speed. So the community is generally much more willing to slow down when they choose to slow down because of the infrastructure, rather than us putting a red circle around a number and telling them they must slow down to that speed. And if they don't, we'll give them a fine. Roundabouts again are a classic example of that. People are not complaining that they slow down to go through the intersection when it's a roundabout. But if you put a speed limit around an intersection in other circumstances, they'll jump up and down as a revenue raising thing. But no, make them slow down off the geometry of the road and the infrastructure in place. They'll never complain about the speed. They might complain about, other little bits and pieces. So if you could just do these advisory style things and then get some infrastructure to slow them down, we're in a much better position. And so that's what they went with in this scenario. And you get these wonderful features. I mean, I love this photo, which I took out there when I was having another look at it. I sort of make sure I go there every time I can because I just enjoy it. But look at that, green light, yet the car is slowing to go over the platform, on the approach to the platform, and we know that is a much better outcome in terms of the severity. So we've ticked off likelihood and severity with this raised platform and signalisation. It's just beautiful. There's less red light running as well, in terms of you pretty much reduce the dilemma zone in terms of pushing people to they're not in that dilemma when the light goes orange, because they know they've got a raised platform to navigate, so they stop. So you're getting some other benefits in that sense. And there you go. There's one sort of making the decision to stop rather than to try to put the foot down and go through that orange. And you've got one that I was very impressed to see just in Hamilton there, just outside Hamilton there. Gordonton and Thomas. And so I was out there with Simon Crowther from Hamilton City Council before it was built, and we having a great look at it. And I think it's a wonderful demonstration that this can be done, and it's not going to end the world. You've got it there, and I think you should be playing around and continuing to tweak on the exact grade you use for the ramps and how you configure them and the drainage and all those practical elements. But I think it's a good example of what can be done. I'd be interested on feedback of how it's performing and the like. I haven't caught up with Simon for a while to find out how it's operating. But you might think, well, is that only then for these sort of local or lower volume environments? I'd just like to show you this one, which is a road with 52,000 vehicles a day bus route, crossing a road with about 25,000 vehicles a day, raised intersection. Used to be a roundabout was ripped out, and finally we were in a position where people at least in Victoria, are not ripping roundabouts out and replacing them with traffic signals and trying to claim that they get a benefit cost ratio of something high because they've given a few extra seconds to every vehicle in terms of congestion minimisation. I mean, certainly that's been happening for eons, hasn't it? Rip the roundabout out because it's saturated, it doesn't perform well, put signals in, that's much better, and we're doing a good thing for our community. Well, you're not. Under normal circumstances. In fact, I used to write a memo when those would come across my desk in the road safety department, which I should dig out. How are we going on time? I'm going to do it. We'll race through a few things later, Kathy. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, or I have to unshare and then reshare. Can you see that?
Oh, we can see your PowerPoints in. Is that what you're trying to show us? You might have to unshare. Everyone needs to behave themselves too, because they're all talking about which part of New Zealand's better than other parts of New Zealand.
Yes.
Okay.
We have civil war in New Zealand.
We can see that now, the memo.
This is just a template, a memo that I used to send. I was in the road safety department and getting these business location designs of under the congestion management program. And so they give it to the road safety department to check it's all safe. Well, I started sending this back and, put in whatever project it was. And then road safety statement. The road safety department has analysed this project as increasing crashes as follows. Project life, 20 years, so it's around about. It's ripping around about in signals. I don't know, actually, it must get 20 years for a signalisation under that program. Anyway, number of deaths attributed to this project, 2.3. Little pictures of people to remind them they're going to kill some people. Serious injuries, 12.6. And then a statement of acceptance. The above trauma is accepted by, and used to send that one back on top of the project proposal. Of course, I never got any signed, and I got very stern talking to from quite a number of executive directors and the like about not understanding the complexities of managing a road system and then balancing off objectives and I'm intentionally provoking people and blah blah blah. Well, sometimes you just need to do that, I think, and say that we know that this is people weren't actually arguing with this fact. They were arguing that they wanted to. That it was the right thing to do because it improved congestion. I can understand that, but not at the cost of people's lives and serious injuries, which we obviously know is going to happen. So I'm very heartened now to see that raised intersections are the norm. And of course, this goes to the core of safe system, because people are just going, well, they shouldn't run the red lights. I mean, if people acted appropriately, it wouldn't happen, and it just wasn't. It's not the case. Anyway, that's an aside, but I think it's a good thing to show, which I've shown a couple of people. Well, where were we? What are we on? 20 past. Okay, we're doing all right.
I'm just confirming, Ken, that previous, that one there, that is Melbourne, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Dalton Childs Road in Melbourne. Now, this one, interestingly, the grade of that ramp is far too shallow. It doesn't give you much. And I don't like the fact that they use the same grade for the pedestrian crossing as the thoroughfare, because that should really be at a much lower one. Oh, we've got some raised hands, Kathy.
Oh, there's two at once. Okay, let's go to Heather.
Oh, everybody's raising their hand.
Hi, just a question. So what is the typical grade at the ramps?
Yeah, good question. And I'll simply direct you to this road design note, which goes through a whole lot of different grades and what you can expect to get out of the speed of those. And this is publicly available. In fact, I think I put that in your memory sticks. Road design note 0307, raised safety platforms, and it's got all of that information in there.
Thank you.
But it's certainly not like an urban speed hump as such. It's a more shallow grade than that.
And I think, Kevin, can you talk now?
Yeah. Can
Great.
you hear me?
Yes.
I noticed in the illustration, the last page, that the island had a fully mountable, very shallow curb, so that if a vehicle loses control, it doesn't damage the vehicle. But if you're thinking safe system, that doesn't really help pedestrians, does it?
No.
So if that was a non-mountable curb, say a Tree F curb, 450 mils high, it would wreck a vehicle, but it would most likely protect a pedestrian because it redirects the vehicle. Would that not be a safer outcome?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I have to ponder that a bit. That would be a high-profile barrier curb there that you'd need to get that redirection. But so I think, yeah, theoretically you're right there. And what you'd be doing in a safe system assessment is analysing that the pedestrian crash risk from the exposure, the likelihood, and the severity. And that would be one of the factors I think you would have at play in working out the likelihood of the pedestrian crash. Because you're right, there is still the ability to mount there, and the pedestrians will all be congregating and waiting there, and certainly that increases the likelihood a little bit. How much it increases the likelihood is going to be something that we need to do a bit more thinking about, and then you'll have to score in a broad brush way in a safe system assessment. But certainly that sort of thinking gets injected in it, and that would be a likelihood factor.
Okay, thank you.
We've got one more question. Raised platforms on approach. Any ideas what to do with Swedish-style departures on roads with no central island?
No, I'm not even quite sure I understand that. I think first let's first have a read of this document and see if it clarifies any of that. And if not, get in contact with me and we can have a bit more of a chat about that. I just need to keep moving on a little bit, I think.
Sure.
Now, I will say that was only one Wally. I've popped past this slide a few times now, so it's just the one Wally with on that slide. I just want to show you this one, which some of you have seen, and Bruce Corbin was showing it around New Zealand quite a bit at one point, which is an intersection. This is more rural environment, high speed. Couldn't afford to get a full-size roundabout because of this thing, which was a telecommunication exchange building, and moving it was just too expensive, and land take and the like. There's the little beast itself. But lots of crashes, high speed, not great alignment with safe system principles. Still pushing for that roundabout. I mean, the temptation would be just to some, right turn facilities, maybe a rural intersection activated warning sign down to 80 or 70 or something like that, which we know is going to be beneficial, but not get us really high alignment with safe system principles. It's very good, but so they pushed at that roundabout with something smaller and went with this sort of compact roundabout, they call it, and here it is. But you'll see there that it's got raised safety platform on the approach to start lowering the speed, straight alignment into it, which we'd usually do some reverse curves, at least in Victoria, and then the actual island itself, or the middle of the roundabout is very, very small, but with a large concrete apron, which allows large vehicles to sweep through around it. So you can actually get very large vehicles through that. And you can see just at that one, it's a very, very small little roundabout. Obviously, your lighting needs to go out to the side. You can't put lighting in the roundabout, it's too small. Other features, but that's the roundabout there. And the rest of it is just mountable concrete apron and slowing vehicles down. So, the ability to pump a lot of those out for a much lower cost is very attractive. The evaluation of this is performing just beautifully at this stage. Again, the raised platforms to slow vehicles on the approach are fairly shallow, and I think it's gives us some wonderful opportunity because we know those big roundabouts cost a huge amount of money. Chris Hine. Time for a quick quiz. I see lots of other questions in there.
Yeah. So active. Okay, what was the cost for that roundabout, Ken?
Yeah, I'll have to recheck that. My gut feel is that one was a bit over 2 million, or maybe it was closer to 3, but it was sort of the first one, and it had a lot of different activities going on and work around it. But I'll get a cost of that. I'll make a note of that. I'll get what their final cost was. It was certainly a huge amount cheaper than getting the full-size one that they were thinking, from land take and moving services and those sort of things. But there was some cost in terms of the asphalt and the like. So it wasn't dirt cheap.
All right, so just another 10 seconds to answer that poll question for whoever hasn't done so yet.
It's a little tricky question, isn't it?
Mm,
In there.
I think they're on to you, Ken. All right, I'll close that one and share.
Well, I mean, so I put it in there. Traffic signals are not safe system, and an unintelligible question is to a degree where I was trying to target the answer, because remember I did say that I don't like talking about it is safe system or it's not safe system. It's a alignment with safe system principles. Then the second one is that it's not about the traffic signals, is it? It's about the speed, the angles, who's using it, and are we sitting within those biomechanical tolerances? In a lot of situations, traffic signals are not aligning that well with safe system principles. So I can understand why some people are saying true on that. But let's not peg it to the specific feature in terms of the countermeasure or the device or the like. Let's just rejig our thinking and think about it for its alignment with safe system principles based on characteristics in terms of the way it's going to be used, and the speeds and the angles and the potential for death and serious injury, which is what a safe system assessment does. So a little bit of a trick question, but I don't by any means, like often people at the end, I put that in because the reason that some people finishing some of these courses around safe system go away and think that traffic signals are, we should never install traffic signals. Oh no, gee, that was not what I was trying to get across. I mean, there's a place for them, and with the correct configurations to keep things within what we know we can handle in terms of forces when mistakes happen, which they will. Awesome, though. I am just loving the questions, the conversations here coming in. Such a great group from that perspective. Okay, I'm going to have to move through lane departure quite quickly, and I need to introduce you to your assignment as well. So we've got a fair bit to cover. But do stand up and have a stretch at any point as we're going. We're going to move through this fairly quickly. So we've got a road here, and you don't know where it is. It could be State Highway 1, could be any, of many other roads in many jurisdictions. It's high speed. It's 100 kilometers per hour, if not 110 kilometers per hour. It's got some sealed shoulders. It's got a center line. And it's got some roadside hazards, and it's got some areas where it's been cleared of vegetation on the roadside. It's got very sort of minor access roads. And without knowing anything about this, just type into the chat what types of crashes are you expecting on this road? What is causing death and serious injury to the road users? Gee, look at this. They're just coming in beautifully. And I'm seeing there are a lot of runoff road, a lot of lane departure, so head-on, runoff road, and then a little bit of, you know, the side road crash stuff as well. But we do know, and so thank you all for that. Yep, head-on loss of control. Oh, yep. Yeah, again, it's quite great that, in one sense, that we know this. We know it clearly, and it's not something that, you know, we need very precision knowledge to understand that there's going to be loss of control to the left and to the right, and then some of those will hit other cars or vehicles coming from the other direction. And we know that there will be trauma spread out along this this route from those lane departure crashes, as I categorize them. And then we know there's a spike in risk at the intersections depending on, you know, the volumes. And little, you know, curves will have a slight increase in risk as well. But it does, you know, it's not the fact that at that little kink in the road is the only place that there is risk on this road. We know that it's throughout, and it continues on for hundreds of kilometres of, you know, continual, you know, risk. So we've just got so much of the network that looks like this, and you know, there's more of it, and we're running at 100 kilometres per hour for the majority of it, and one mistake by this vehicle or this vehicle, and we're in a position where the energy is just not survivable, and even leaving the road and all of our things that we can hit. If you remember, we talked about the side impact pole at 29 kilometres per hour or 32 kilometres per hour. So when we've just established that leaving the road is something that's going to happen, hitting trees and power poles and the like is very far from safe system. And this is one we showed in a lot of the Austroads webinars, but this is the kind of energy within a 60 kilometre per hour crash with a pole, about 60 kilometres per hour. The violence of that is immense. And so for us to have any of those fixed hazards in the roadside is going to be extremely dangerous. But even removing those hazards isn't going to get us to that highest alignment with safe system principles, because there's still rollover potential. There's vehicles going further than that and hitting objects beyond any cleared areas that we're providing. And there's a number of different graphs here, which I'm going to whip through pretty quickly. And if you have a particular interest in understanding, you know, why we're moving away from clear zones to, you know, continuous barrier systems, if you can afford it, or under the new Austroads Guide to Road Safety Parts, Austroads Guide to Road Design, Part 6, a sort of different risk mechanism which shows clearly that risk does not stop at some arbitrary clear zone number in terms of meters from the edge line, that it continues on, and you need to start factoring and managing that into your entire thinking. So I'll jump through these. We know that you know, even you just keep clearing the roadside, and you're not really going to get to any lower than about 4 casualty crashes per 100 million VKT, because it sort of asymptotes out around that mark. And you get rollover, you get striking of hazards. So the idea of clear zone, and I probably don't need this slide up there as much anymore with the release of the recent Part 6, new Part 6 to Guide to Road Design. But we know clear zones are not necessarily a safe place to be, with hazards beyond it and rollovers, and that these wide clear zones don't have the highest alignment with safe system principles, but they do reduce the likelihood of crashes. So clearing some of the vegetation close to the road or some of the fixed hazards close to the road will reduce the likelihood of crashes. You're just not addressing that severity, and there is continual risk throughout. So we finally moved away from, you know, these big, you know, when we're designing town bypasses and the things, creating these clear zones from the edge line and these big wide medians, because we know that that is, there people will still leave their lane, go beyond whatever clear zone has been provided, and get over to the other side and head-on crash. And you know, this is literally 6 months ago. You picking up the Australis Guide to the road design and designing a new town bypass. You would design it pretty close to this, and we know that it's not going to give us as good an alignment with safe system principles as we could. And the characteristics of that are due to a number of things. And as I say, I'm going to jump through these. This is just sort of showing some of the research as to why you get challenges with death and serious injury associated with clear zones. And there's some different documents out there, and I know New Zealand's done a lot of work in this space as well. I like this one, I suppose, because it's something that I use a lot and have had involvement in, but it was the supplement to the old Australians Part 6, but that's now integrated into the Part 6 for Guide to Road Design. But anyway, we again, this is sort of just a very generic sketch, and it's site by site. You need to be thinking about all sorts of things, and a safe system assessment is a great way to help this. But you can sort of see here high alignment with safe system principles, low alignment with safe system principles down here, and we sort of have this these cross-sectional hierarchy to a degree. You know, it would depend on volume, obviously, and many other characteristics and the like. But generally, you know, barriers all the way through, protecting. And I don't think that's rocket science, and it's not breaking news to many of you. There's some interesting stuff in terms of where the risk changes from head-on to run-off road, and again, the New Zealand research is what we generally turn to on that from, I think it was Fabian and somebody else who did that. I think it was Fergus, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So lots of different cross sections, but you know, our highest alignment really is continuous barrier systems, but it costs a lot of money, doesn't it? And so we won't be able to do that everywhere. And so how we manage those other bits of road, a safe system assessment can very much help us in that sense, because we analyse the exposure, the likelihood, and then the severity as well, and factor in a number of different things to come out with some scores. And so you can be weighing up different configurations. Obviously, the challenges into the intricacies of barrier design, and we know we get some pretty good safety outcomes from barriers quite close to the road. And we know, though, the community goes absolutely berserk when you do this. And if they're breaking down and they have nowhere to get out of danger in their mind, I mean, there's certainly a risk there. It's not as much as the individual believes it is in the community, but that to a degree doesn't appear to matter. And so we've certainly learnt our lesson in Victoria after doing many hundreds of kilometres of barriers this close to the edge line. You know, politically, I've had to go and rip them out and move them out to sort of 4 metres, and sometimes you just can't do that, and it's been very challenging. And just, you know, going on to another of many road safety devices out there, I could have mentioned. I picked a Raptor cushion as one that I think shows again some good alignment with trying to address the severity of crashes, which can be the forgotten one. A Raptor cushion, for those who don't know, it is sort of this device, and it sits around a power pole, and it's got a bit of cushioning to it, but its main energy function is to rotate as it's struck and push the vehicle aside. I always say it's a little bit like you know, martial arts, where you deflect the energy of a punch. And then I have to clarify that by saying I've never done martial arts in my life, but I watched The Karate Kid, so that's it's about all I've got. But it does rotate as struck and move it so the energy is dissipated. And I really do like that, and especially when we had a crash in Mildura, which is in a regional town in Victoria. Car was travelling 93 kilometres an hour or something when it struck the power pole as they went flying around this roundabout. So roundabouts do really well, but sometimes people are really doing these extreme behaviours. A group of 4 young males in a old Ford with pretty much no safety features, and they all survived minor injuries. And the forensic report basically said absolutely the raptor that was around that pond saved their lives, or catastrophic or high-level serious injury. So I just think we need to continue to work for those things. I'm not endorsing that product particularly because there's other products and there's lots of different devices out, but they're thinking about that energy. Can we manage energy? Can we reduce energy? Which is all about, where that big tick is down there, severity. Quick quiz time, and then I'll tell you what you're going to have to do as an assignment. Ooh.
I wasn't ready that time, Ken.
Yes, I was on to Kathy. Off getting a coffee or something, were you?
Something like that.
I moved through it quickly because I want to have enough time to talk about the assignment.
Good.
Again, a little bit of just well, yeah, it's an interesting little wording of the question.
One more person to vote. Oh, thank you. There we go.
Beautiful. Okay. So true or false? Sealed shoulders improve road safety, and yes, that is true. Absolutely. And the thing that I suppose I hadn't mentioned was that it was all about the likelihood of crashes by sealing shoulders, not addressing the severity of crashes or the exposure to crashes by sealing those shoulders. But again, stuff that we need to make sure that by things not, being considered, I haven't got into what is primary, what is supporting. I mean, a sealed shoulder is considered a supporting treatment, but by no means are we saying that that does not improve road safety. Absolutely, it improves road safety. It's just not addressing that severity of crash. So thank you for that. Okay, this is good. So I have whipped through the lane departure stuff fairly quickly, and I'm happy to sort of continue to talk one-on-one with people as they have an interest in that sort of stuff, or if you've got other information and things, I'm always keen to gather more information and improve my breadth of information that I'm producing these slides with. So please send me that sort of stuff. But you've got an assignment to do. So I'll explain the assignment. Kathy, I'll take any questions after I sort of explain what needs to be done. And it can be questions about the content or about the assignment that everybody's going to have to do. As I said, I think most of you are going to find this pretty quick and easy. And what we've done is provided a Word document. The Word document is in Schoology in the assignment section for this module. And you're going to download that Word document. And this is what it looks like. Kathy, I assume you're able to see my Word document?
Yep, all good to go.
Okay, so the instructions are there, step by steps, very easy. You are going to select an intersection, any intersection you want. It could be the one outside your house or the office, or it could be one that you remember going through on a holiday or whatever it was. And you're not going to need to go there, but you'll be able to just use Street View or something. And then you're just going to fill out the information below, which tells us a little, tells who you are and gives a link to the intersection. Then inspect the intersection via Street View, or I suppose if it is out the front, you can just have a look at it. And then you fill out the information on page 2, and I'll take you just jump down to here. And all we want, very simple exercise, is for that existing intersection, we want you to list between 1 and a maximum 3 things, factors that influence the exposure to crashes at that intersection under the Safe System Assessment Framework. Now, my hint here is that it's all going to be around the volume there. So, you know, you could say, you know, the traffic volume is high or something like that, or the like. So the exposure is something fairly, hopefully easy. The likelihood, we want you to list between 1 and 3 factors that influence the likelihood. So they could be, you know, the signs, the lines, the sight distance, whatever you think. And then between 1 and 3 factors that influence the severity. And we've been through quite a few things that influence severity. And then all we want is one change, one thing you could change at that intersection that would influence the exposure to crashes. And so that would really be ways that you alter the volume of pedestrians or vehicles going through that intersection one way or another. The likelihood, one thing that would influence the likelihood, and one thing that would influence the severity, that would you know, reduce the severity of the crash. It's as easy as that, and it's really confirmation that you're getting that categorization clear in your head. And really, I mean, a safe system assessment is that just expanded, you know, with a few other things and some quantification. And yeah, well, there's a bit more to it. But, generally, that's a really good platform for undertaking a safe system assessment. So that's your task. It's easy. In there, you're just going to put your name and a link to, just grab the URL of the street view. So when it's being marked, we can just jump in there and have a quick look ourselves so we understand what you're talking about. Pretty easy assignment, and it's available in Schoology. You upload it in Schoology. Ideally PDF it if you have that ability, because it's just easier to read in there. When is it due, Kathy? I'll hand that one to you to.
Look, by Friday would be terrific. So before our next session, if you get a chance to do it before then, that would be good. Yeah, it's submitted by Friday. And Schoology tends to work best in Google Chrome. So if you're having any troubles with it, flick over to Google Chrome and see if that helps things.
Thank you. And I really think that the quiz, 10 or 9 quick questions, and that shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes. And really, this assignment is a quick exercise as well. And you know, I would say 10, 15 minutes at absolute most on this. If you are struggling with this at all, just flick me a note or give me a call, and I'll talk you through it. But it is genuinely a fairly quick exercise, and you sort of did this already with that that mock exercise we did for the raised intersection there. So thank you there for people clarifying the Karate Kid Part 2 with the deflection of energy, the drum technique. This is excellent. I like this group. I always liked running these courses in New Zealand. Always fun, nice people.
It is fun. Look, and if you know people can't get it in by Friday, that's it. You're not going to be kicked out of the course, and it's the end of the world. Monday's good too, or whenever you can, is great.
Yeah, that's right. Really, at the end of the course is where we do our final check that everything's in, and you've got your pass marks, and also you know, but it's good to knock this off. And as I say, it shouldn't take you long at all.
Excellent. Look, just about everyone completed Module 1 quiz, which is terrific. Again, a very high achieving group. So thank you. Module 2 quiz is in the Module 2 folder. that's where the assignment is as well, and that's where I'll pop the recording shortly too. So
if you have any trouble uploading or anything like that, you can email it through to Kathy. But our preference is to house it in there so we don't lose it amongst the other emails or anything like that. But you know, that's your alternate way, is to email it through, and we can handle it from there. Next week, we just finalise a bit more of the thinking and categorisation and road users in terms of pedestrian, cyclists, motorcyclists. Sorry, not next week, on Friday. Kathy will tell me and remind me that I meant to say. And in our next module, we will be doing pedestrian, cyclists, motorcyclists, just to clarify those, because they're distinct crash types or users that we assess under a safe system assessment. And then next week, we delve into just the mechanics of a safe system assessment, and then off you go to do one. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate your feedback and your input. Please feel free to share resources, examples, and the like with others in the group. Email chain there was good. And I look forward to catching you on Friday.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Bye.